Okay, again, Volume 2, Part 3, Story 5, Food in the Desert. That's what this is about. Okay? For 3 long hot days, the great caravan moved on through the wilderness. People began to get tired and thirsty. The water that they brought along with them was almost gone. When the children asked their parents for a drink, they were told they couldn't have one. Those in charge of the cattle began to get worried about what would happen to the animals if water wasn't found soon. 500,000 men, besides women and children, can drink a lot of warm water on warm days. So could thousands of cows, sheep, and goats. Water would have to be found, or they couldn't go on. By the end of the 3rd day, many of the marchers were beginning to get worried. But presently somebody, scouted far ahead, began to wave excitedly. Yeah. Water, he cried, water. And every word, the very word, made everybody feel better. Spirits rose and they passed forward eagerly. Then they were disappointed. When they first reached the pool, stooping down to drink it, they found it was bitter and quite unfit to drink. Quickly the word spread back among the line. The water is bad. You can't drink it. Myra, or bitterness. Mara. M-A-R-A. Yeah, Mara. Or bitterness, they called the place. Grumbling again, the people blamed Moses. Why had he brought them to such a spot? Didn't he know they would need water? Just as though Moses, who had lived in the wilderness for 40 years, didn't know about the water problem. What shall we drink? They cried. As always, Moses took his troubles to God, and God had his way out. God had a way out. He pointed out a certain tree that, if cut down and thrown into bitter water, it makes it sweet. Moses did as he was told, and the water became fit to drink. Next day the caravan moved on, and they came to Elim, where were 12 wells of water and 70 palms to provide little shade. And they encamped there by the waters. Everybody was happy now. This was the first real rest that they had since leaving Egypt. After all the excitement and lack of sleep and a long march, they were just about worn out. So they were very glad for Elim, and they were so very glad for Elim, with its cool, fresh water and its palm trees. Moses wisely decided to let them stay there for 2 or 3 weeks, and then ordered them to pack up their tents and start their way again. So, on the 15th day of the 2nd month, just 6 weeks after leaving Egypt, they came to the wilderness of Sin, about 100 miles down the peninsula of Sinai. Wilderness of Sin. 100 miles down the peninsula of Sinai. Interesting directions. It was a dry, barren, rocky country with little pasture for the cattle and no place to grow food. What a place! murmured some. Why has he brought us here? If we'd gone north instead of south, we had we would have been in Canaan by now, said others. What does he think he's going to grow here? Asked a farmer, comparing the dry, sandy soil to the rich loam of the Nile Valley. And how does he think we're going to keep our cattle alive in such poor shrubberland? Asked another. Their complaints were catching, and soon everybody was grumbling. And then, as food supply got lower and lower, the whole congregation turned on Moses and Aaron, as they always did when in trouble. Forgetting all the miracles God had wrought for them in Egypt, at the Red Sea, and at Marah, they cried out, Would God, would to God we had died in the hands of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pot, when we sat by the flesh pot, and when we did eat. Got an illustration on the bottom, and the King James is kind of getting a little weird. Okay. Uh, would Would to God we had died by the hands of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and then we did eat bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. In other words, they were hungry. It was a silly thing to say, but they had been slaves so long that they didn't know any better. Even though they had seen God do many marvelous, wonderful things for them, they still did not understand Him or trust Him. Their chief concern was now to get enough to eat. They thought they would be willing to be slaves again if only they could just smell those flesh pots once more. Flesh pots, cooking. Moses told God what the people were saying and asked him what to do. God promised that he would rain bread from heaven. That evening, just as the people were wondering what to eat, thousands of birds flew into camp. These were quail, and they flew so low that it was easy to kill them. Everybody had a good supper, and some perhaps remembered to thank God for looking after them once more. But what about breakfast? There was no stores where they might go and buy shredded wheat or cornflakes, and no milkman to leave milk outside their tent. What sort of food would God provide in the morning? Many wondered. Would he send quail again? No, instead, he sent something quite different. Early the next day, as soon as the dew had gone, behold, upon the face of the wilderness there lay small round things, as small as a hoard frost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, They said one another, "It is manna." And Moses said to them, "This is the bread which the Lord hath given you to eat." How generously they picked up the first little pieces with thumb and finger to taste it. But it was nice. In other words, they were scared. I would be scared too. But it was nice. It was sweet, had a sweet taste, like wafers made with honey, and they liked it. How good it must have seemed to all those poor, hungry people, especially the boys and the girls. Morning by morning, without fail, they found the manna there, right at their tent's door. All they had to do was to gather it up and eat it. For the next 40 years, this was their main source of food. There was there was strange one strange thing about it, however. It appeared to be on the ground only 6 days a week. It never it was never there on the seventh day. Not one little tiny piece. Why? Because God wanted to teach them to keep the Sabbath day holy. Adam and Eve had to keep the Sabbath day in the beginning. So had Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When the children of Israel went to Egypt at Joseph's invitation, they had to keep it too. But when they were made slaves, they had to they had not been able to keep it. During the times, many came to think it didn't matter, that God didn't expect them to keep it anymore. Some had even forgot which the day it was. And of course, the illustration is of them catching a quail. And that was their meat, was the quail. Okay. And we have another illustration. It's by Russell Harlan. And, the actor, it looks much like actors to me. But this is, let me get it in there. There's the painting by Russell Harlan. And it says, food was not easy to find in the wilderness, so God sent manna from heaven every day. But on the sixth day of the week, he sent a double portion to last them over the Sabbath. Let's get back to the story. So now, by the miracle of the manna, God sought to bring his people back into the right and true way. Every Friday, the sixth day, they were told to go out and gather a double portion of manna, each to last over the Sabbath. Miraculously, marvelously, no, marvelously, the manna gathered on Friday kept for 2 days. Whereas, when too much was gathered on the other day, it quickly spoiled. This, plus the fact that no manna appeared on the seventh day, led people to see which day God wanted them to keep as the Sabbath. There simply couldn't be any doubt about it. It was the seventh day, and no other. The first, at first, there were some who didn't believe God meant what he said. These went out on the seventh day and gathered and found none. God was displeased with them and said, How long refuse ye to keep my commandments and my law? See, for that the Lord hath given you the Sabbath. Therefore he giveth you on the sixth day the bread of 2 days. Besides ye, every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the seventh day. This is a lesson taught once every week for 40 years. For forever mixed in the mind of the Israelites the right day on which to keep the Sabbath. By the manna of God said to them 2,080 times 52 multiplied by 40. This day, the seventh day, is my Sabbath. And he did so in order that they never they might never forget it, nor have any excuse for making a mistake about it. They never did forget it. Even now, 3,000 years later, this is 1950, 54, 53, they had not forgotten it. How could they? How could anybody? And then that was the end of part 3, story 5, and we got the next one, and apparently that one was a big story, was about the manna, and my daughter asked about it a little bit the other day, and maybe I need to read this to her and keep it up. I'll see you for the next story in a bit.